Thanks, Moshe. This has been a wonderful conference for me. I'm a provost at the University of Maryland. I'm a biologist, not a computer scientist, but I feel very responsible for all these students, more every semester, who want to be trained in computer science, and all the others who I know should want to be trained in it and don't understand that yet. So I'm going to take home a lot of wonderful ideas from this conference. I asked my colleague, Keith Marzullo, who is dean of our iSchool at Maryland, to join me to help me tell you about 3 programs at Maryland that are great examples, I think, of experiential learning, not necessarily machine learning or AI. But we have a number of others we could talk about, one of which Dr. Aoun mentioned, the ACES program, which is a cybersecurity program for undergraduates. Maybe Keith can talk a little bit about that towards the end. His college participates in it. But we have been very much working along the same lines as Dr. Aoun's book proposes, not thinking so much about making education or making our graduates robot-proof, but trying to involve them in experiential learning. I think we've all known for a long time that learning by collaboration and experiment with real-world examples and experience is much, much more effective than the traditional lecture, sage on the stage sort of thing. We've been trying in many different ways at Maryland to do this, as I'm sure all of you have. We could have told you about a number of different programs, I think, but we've chosen 3 that we think are good examples. Let me see here. So these are some of the principles that we're after. These are laid out very beautifully in Dr. Aoun's book. We want to be involving our students in as many of these things as possible. I think, as I say, we have a lot of good examples, but there are some real challenges in doing this, and many of you probably experienced some of this yourselves, in delivering this kind of experiential education to large numbers of students. So we have something like 28,000 undergraduates. We want all of them to have many of these experiences. How do we really do that? Taking it to scale is a significant logistical challenge. It involves taking it to the real world, effectively finding partners that really produce an effective experience for the students and where the students can make the partners pleased and produce something that's worthy of further interaction with that partner. Teaching faculty how to teach this way. We teach as faculty generally the way we were taught. And for most of us, older faculty at least, that is by lecture. And faculty are not comfortable always teaching with project-based instruction, collaborative interactions, and so on. So training the faculty and inspiring the faculty to teach this way, teaching them why they should teach this way, is a big deal. And then creating facilities where this can happen readily. The old fishbowl lecture hall is not very conducive to collaborative, interactive learning. And this is something that I think as a provost, university administrators have to address. Creating new facilities is not cheap and not easy. Assessing outcomes of this kind of teaching is not easy either. How do you test for mastery? And how do you determine whether the programs that you're putting on actually do what you think they do? These are not easy challenges, and we need to be aware of the necessity to do them and to do them well. So the 3 case studies we want to tell you about, one is a partnership in action learning for sustainability, which is really a very extraordinary paradigm, I think. Keith will tell you about that. First year innovation and research experience is one that I started actually at the University of Texas at Austin years ago as a freshman research initiative, and I'll tell you about that. And then the Academy of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, if we have time, we're going to tell you a little bit about how we do that at Maryland, although I think many of you probably do some of the same things at your universities. So first of all, facilities. We are very fortunate in that we had a donor who helped us build a beautiful new Center for Learning and Teaching that is 93,000 net assignable square feet. It provides collaborative learning space for something like 12,000 students a day, 2,000 seats in a variety of different classrooms ranging from small to large lecture halls. But the large lecture halls are flexible so that the seats can turn around in every other row and you can create collaborative groups in the midst of a lecture format if you wish to. And we house the Teaching and Learning Transformation Center and the Academy of Innovation and Entrepreneurship in that building so that we have a teaching center for teaching faculty in the same place as this fabulous facility. So here's what it looks like. It's lovely. We just brought it online about a year ago. As I say, we have instituted about 5 years ago a Teaching and Learning Transformation Center for training the faculty, and we're using this building as an incentive. There is nothing like new, good space to inspire faculty. Honestly, or as a recruitment tool, I've seen it over and over again, but it's also true for a teaching venue. So we don't allow people to teach in this building unless they are teaching with project-based instruction or discovery, collaborative interactions, and so on. And we try to involve as many experiential situations as possible. And it's quite a big undertaking. But the building itself has been instrumental in making this happen with the faculty. The first example I wanted to tell you about is the Partnership in Action for Learning for Sustainability. This is learning through experience with real-world operations, that involve multiple classes. The first year of something like 30 classes, working with cities and counties in Maryland to address an array of important problems related to sustainability. And Keith's College has really been working in that very actively, so I wanted to let him tell you a little bit more about it.
Thank you, Mary Ann. So PALS has been a wonderful program. At a very high level, it looks very simple. What you do is you go out and you find a community that would like to work with the university, and you find people in the university who would like to work with the community. It sounds very simple. It's actually really, really hard, right? Because the community people have real problems that need to be solved. By community, we mean people like mayors, city planners, city managers, planning boards for counties, and so on. And they have a set of problems that need to be solved, and they don't have budgets necessarily to be able to solve them. So if the university can step in through courses, through capstones, to be able to provide the kind of things that the community wants, then this is a wonderful thing. It allows you to do what Dr. Moon calls far transfer in education, taking things you're learning in a certain course and move them into the community context. So the communities that have been worked with this way are the following. It started off in September 24 with Frederick, Maryland, but it's included College Park, that's the community in which the university is at, Howard County, Salisbury out on the Eastern Peninsula, Southwestern Baltimore Partners, Anne Arundel County, and Annapolis. And this is still continuing. In the very first year, they involved 30 different courses, 16 disciplines, and 350 students participated in this. So it was actually a very large kind of thing. Frederick had this wonderful video on it. If you look for this, it's very easy to find. PALS Frederick, you'll see one of the city planners saying that we can't believe this. We were able to get $1 million worth of planning and effort out of something that cost us close to $100,000, which is mainly used to support the program. My own college has benefited from this mainly through our capstones. We offer several programs. One is a master's in HCI. One is a master's in information management. The master's of HCI, for example, one capstone was working with the Montgomery County Department of Parks. They were trying to figure out how to get millennials into the parks. because they aren't being used that much. You may have heard of this crisis. And so they were looking at what ways can we use technology to be able to bring the millennials in. And so since it's an HCI program, they use iterative contextual design. They went out and interviewed people, and that is millennials, to find out what they wanted. And they found out, for example, many wanted to get there to be away from technology. Imagine that. But it turned out they ended up developing an app to be able to help people understand, well, I have some free time, what can I go do right now? And that would help bring people into the parks. Another project had to do with Prince George's County. Due to various federal and state mandates, the community has to watch particulates, nitrogen, phosphorus going into the drainage water, into the watershed. And Prince George's County is not flush with money. And so they had to find a way to be able to prioritize their investments in this. So our students went out, collected all the various sources of information, came up with great ways to visualize which are the parts that are being impacted by this, and therefore allow Prince George's County to focus their dollars better. Both of these are being used, and I've just named two from my college. In general, the impact of this has been very high. So out of this, the students benefit by having real-world applications. And not only that, they're tied into the learning objectives of the courses. I mentioned an HCI course, information management course. They also have things in architecture, in public planning, and public health. And the faculty benefit by actually allowing them to frame their work in this context. And of course, the communities benefit tremendously. So this is an amazing program. It's run by a guy named Yuri Aver. And he is a former county planner, director. So having someone like that has been very influential. We have a spin-off program that's being done with these people in my own college. We have the current mayor of the former mayor of College Park, Andy Fellows, who's, again, making this work. Both these people, by having such great connections in the community, are able to make the connections necessary to make this work.
Thanks, Keith. The next program we want to tell you about is one, as I say, that I started many years ago now at the University of Texas at Austin, where I was dean. And we started it as an alternative to the freshman chemistry and biology labs, the canned labs that everybody is required to take, that seem to be turning students off to science after we finally get them in the university majoring in science, and then we give them a freshman biology lab that makes them leave. So what I wanted to do was to come up with something that involved them really in research directly, but it's very hard to do this at scale. We had something like 2,000 freshman biology students. How do we manage to do individual research experiences, really legitimate ones, for that number of students, and even more for freshman chemistry? So this came from really the faculty in chemistry and biology at Texas. But when I became provost at Maryland, I took it to Maryland and tried to make it broader. And it was broadened at Texas across the whole College of Science, but I wanted to broaden it across the whole university at Maryland, and so that's what we're doing. We renamed it. It used to be called Freshman Research Initiative, which wasn't very sexy. It's now called FIRE, First Year Research Experience. And what happens is the students really become, in groups, part of faculty's research programs and groups. These are two examples of FIRE innovation research streams and groups. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. But the paradigm is that there is a faculty leader, sometimes several, who set the problems, really, and devise the framework for the research. And it's part of that faculty member's research agenda or scholarship agenda. There's a research educator who works with the students. This is a postdoc who understands the discipline and the issues, but who is responsible for making sure the students achieve learning goals. These are freshmen, and this is replacing, in some cases at least, a course they would have taken that's part of a hierarchy of courses. So they need to achieve learning goals, specific learning goals. But we want them to have a legitimate research experience, and it actually works extremely well. Usually groups of about 30 students. Peer mentors are part of the support staff. Students, after they finish the course, often become peer mentors. We had to, again, create space for this. At Texas, we renovated 4 old labs into flexible sort of lab/research lab areas. At Maryland, we've done some of that, but the Ed St. John Center, the new Learning and Teaching Center, has given us some options, so we didn't have to do a lot from scratch with renovated space. This is the paradigm. In their first year as freshmen, the first course is an introduction to research, scholarly literature, data analytics, or whatever the discipline mandates. Science is one path, humanities is a little bit different. The second semester, they join the stream, they begin doing the research, working on the problem in groups, teams usually. They can apply for summer fellowships, some do, some don't, and work through the summer, but then they finish working on the project in the fall, and in the spring of their sophomore year, they may take next steps, continue with research with that individual, become peer mentors, do other things, even get help finding temporary employment and so on based on their research program. These are the streams we have right now at Maryland, and you can see there's quite an array of different topics. We have a couple in AI, one in machine learning that is sponsored by Capital One Bank. We have 16 streams, about 500 students now. Every year we're adding a couple more streams. My goal is to get this up to a level where we can have a very significant proportion of the freshman class having this option. At Texas, we were able to really do a controlled experiment because we had to assign students randomly to the stream versus the canned labs. And we found very significant improvement in student outcomes by this experience. Much improved graduation rates, much improved retention in the college, higher, a large proportion, something like 2/3 of them continued doing research all 4 years. About 4 times as many went on to graduate school or medical school as the FRI group. So it was very, very high impact in terms of student outcomes. That work has been published actually now. Some work that went on after I left to come to Maryland was combined here and published in a publication a year ago or so. So this has been a very high, very successful project involving students in firsthand research. The thing that made it work and made it possible was really that research educator, that non-tenure track faculty member who took responsibility for making everything happen. Just like with PALS, it was really a lot these implementers like Uri and Andy. And I think that's important to remember in terms of trying to produce things like this. The Academy of Entrepreneurship was something that was started in response to the Maryland president, new president coming in, President Lowe, in 2013. He had decided that Maryland needed to become an entrepreneurial campus in terms of teaching students entrepreneurship very, very explicitly. So the AIE Academy, the Academy of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, was established to train students. But again, we have 28,000 students, and he wanted all of them trained this way. He wanted all of them to get a sampling of it. We are 35% of the way towards that goal, and I'm going to let Keith tell you about how we got there. So here we are. Last year, we were touching a large number of those students in some way, not all of them in the same way.
Thank you. So as Mary Ann said, the growth in this program has been phenomenal. And the way, well, first I got to show you the space. Eddie is the Edward St. John, the building that Mary Ann first started talking about, and they've created this beautiful design space, with separate design rooms. It's very Silicon Valley. We really like it. But what they've done in this program is they've taken two threads. One is the idea of design thinking. Again, these are things that I'm sure most of you know, with the idea of building an empathy with the people for whom you're designing, doing contextualized iterative design. And the other part is using lean startup, this idea of going out and interviewing customers, modifying what you're doing. If you've ever worked with the I-Core program in NSF, something that Farnham helped set up, that's following the same lean startup model. And by going through these two processes, the students quickly learn how to apply them both to be acting in an entrepreneurial manner. So what the Academy has done is they've come up with a menu. Everything going from a light touch, where you just have a couple of sections that are added to a class, a couple of lectures that illustrate it, to a full integration within the course. And because of this, it's been spread throughout the whole university. These kind of things are being added to courses in every college we have on campus. And it's really wonderful to see how this works. There's also a partnership with Stanford and the D School that is part of this effort. And one thing, when I've talked to people about this, I'd like to emphasize, when you hear about entrepreneurialism, people tend to think about creating new companies or doing things that are trying to be disruptive and so on in terms of being able to make money. Yet the people who are applying this within the courses within the college are very broad. For example, in our College of Arts and Humanities, it was applied to looking at the questions of income inequality. And the students in this who had normally read an essay ended up using AIE methods to examine the problem. And they came up with some quite innovative ideas and also learned some of the limitations of the method. So they were able to come up with new ideas and also realize that this process was not helping them get to the core reasons, as you would think with this kind of approach. But also it's been applied by another person, I think, in public health to come up with better ways to have student posters at conferences. As you know, student posters at conferences are deathly dull. And so they've been able to come up with new ways to help actually present information in a much more interesting manner. This is the menu, the light touch, so you can introduce one or two classes to actually having a Fearless Ideas course that embeds it completely. Courses we have on our HCI Master's program fall into the Fearless Ideas courses. This is being run by Dean Chang. Dean is not a dean, that's his first name. He says he's a dean for life. And Dean has tremendous energy and vision on this. Again, he's a leader who has a background, comes from Stanford. He understands the process has been applied very broadly and is really the one who's been able to continue to push this. I believe we will get to very close to the 100%.
Thanks, Keith. And I point out that these modules or courses can be actually delivered by what Dean calls peer innovation coaches and AIE facilitators. Again, non-tenure track faculty who've been trained to deliver these things for the regular faculty. And that's, I think, what makes the scale possible. These are just some bragging things. Chronicle of Higher Ed has covered us a couple of times here, and actually once about the Ed St. John Center too. So Jeff, thank you very much. Now, going back to where we started, are we there yet? I think, yes, we know how to do a lot of these things. We are achieving a lot of these goals, but we're really not to scale yet. And honestly, I am really bothered by another question that's kind of related to that, related to this group today. To what extent do we actually need to be focusing on teaching all of our students something about AI and maybe computer science in general, but how do we deliver that? Can we do it like the AIE Academy in modules? Maybe so. But I would love it if we could talk a little bit about that among this group before we all break up. But I'd also like to make the point that I think until our major public universities can deliver this type of learning to most of our students, we're really not there yet. Major publics have a huge amount of leverage and clout. This is where most of the students are. But we've also got a lot of inertia and not very much money often, and so on and so forth. So I think figuring out how to do this right in a major public setting like the University of Maryland is really important. And I appreciate any suggestions you all might have. Thank you.